Hello, and welcome to the CTO Magazine interview series. I'm Adita Karkera, Chief Data Officer for Deloitte's Government and Public Services. And today I am excited to have with us Chris Kraft, Deputy Chief Technology Officer, AI and Emerging Technology at the Department of Homeland Services. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You talked a little bit about, the guardrails that we need to keep in mind as we look at new technologies and new tools, whether that is emerging tech like Gen AI or others. Uh, that gets me to the question of governance. Whether it's data governance or AI governance, that could be really complex for an organization as large as DHS, especially with all the complicated and complex kind of data systems you host. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what that governance landscape looks like for DHS?
Sure. Um, Governance absolutely critical for any organization leveraging AI, but especially in the public sector to make sure that we have sufficient governance. And what is that governance? So for us at DHS, we have a policy on how do we use AI and how do we acquire AI. We've got a policy on facial recognition and facial capture. And we've got a policy on our use of the commercially approved generative AI tools that I talked to you about earlier. So those are our pieces to the puzzle. We also make those publicly available on our external website. Internally, we've got a governance board that meets and a coordination group of our AI leadership that meets under the OMB M2410. There is a requirement to have an AI governance board, which we do have at DHS, that is composed of leaders throughout our organization. That's a critical governing body that is actively engaged in how we're leveraging artificial intelligence and how we're doing that, how we're using the capability responsibly. The AI leadership coordination, another group that we have internally. We also have a responsible use group, which I think is it's really important perspective to bring to the use of artificial intelligence at DHS and generally in the public sector, bringing in the privacy organization and our civil rights and civil liberties, which we call our CRCL organization, to look at the work that we're doing for the pilots that I talked about earlier. They're actively involved in those pilot efforts to make sure that responsible use is a part of everything that we do, and that is at DHS first and foremost. How do we use the technology responsibly, and how do we remain transparent on our use? So there's also under external guidance the requirement to have our use case inventory, which we do have, and M2410 outlined requirements for safety and rights impacting designations on use cases. And so that's also another piece of the puzzle on how do we govern the use of AI across the department, and how do we ensure that we're using it responsibly.
Chris, thanks for sharing those. And as we look to wrap up this conversation, one final question for you. Do you have any advice that you would like to share for our audience, for folks that are looking to grow in this data and AI space?
I think we're at a really important time in our history, and not to overplay it, but I think that given where we are with the technology and the need to both leverage it in our mission spaces, but also to understand how it could be leveraged externally and how do we need to protect our organizations. I think we're at a really critical point, and I think it's really important that the government is at the leading edge with AI, and in order to do that, we need to remain educated on the technology and how it's evolving. We need to have the right resources to support us and that understand the technology and can help us apply it. And I also think in the public sector, primarily at the federal level, but I also think it applies to state and local, that we need to work together and we need to share information because there's no point in every federal agency or department figuring this out on their own and having to, just blindly try to navigate. And I think there are a lot of, I know that there are a lot of efforts underway to collaborate through the Chief AI Officer Council and other activities across the federal space. But I think that's so important that we work together, that we share information, that we help each other out, and continue to leverage the technology responsibly.
That's great advice, Chris. Thank you for that. Constant learning and constant sharing of information and kind of continuing to build that private public sector ecosystem for knowledge sharing. Thank you for sharing those key insights, Chris. It's been great talking to you today, and thank you for investing the time here.
Thank you, Adita.
And for all the other listeners here, please continue to follow the rest of our interview series on CTO Magazine as well as Deloitte. Thank you so much.